just because a food has fat in it does not mean it's bad for you. Here to break down the differences between good and bad fats, please welcome back dietitian Carrie Dennett. It's so good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we were just talking about this whole thing about fat, where we went through that big phase where fat-free was what everybody thought they were supposed to be on, and it took us down a bad road.
It totally did. I mean, I think the 1990s were the pinnacle of that with the awful Snackwell's cookies. You might as well have been eating cardboard, but you know, they were fat-free, so you could have the whole box. And I think the tide started.
And we did.
Yeah, and the tide started to turn probably around the mid-2000s, but people are still so confused. There was a recent survey, and about 81% of people know that there are good fats and bad fats, but only about 19% could actually even tell you what they were.
There we go. So that's what we're going to tackle today.
Yeah.
What's the difference between a good and a bad fat? Why do we need the good ones, and why do we want to avoid the bad ones?
Yeah, and I like to use good and bad kind of with air quotes because, you know, everything in moderation. It's more about the proportion of the fats in your diet. And, you know, the dietary guidelines for Americans, they lifted the ban on total fat. They know that the total amount of fat isn't the issue, but they still recommend reducing saturated fats, which is what you find in animal foods and coconut oil. I like to mention that because that's
because we think that's super healthy, but that in fact has saturated fats.
Yeah, and so using a little less of those foods and using them where it makes sense. I mean, use butter or coconut oil where it really makes sense for a flavor perspective, but not having that be your go-to fat. So better go-tos, like for cooking, you know, olive oil is just my go-to, you know, most of the time. Avocado oil is another good choice. All of these fats over here have really healthy monounsaturated fats.
And why is that okay or good for us?
They're heart healthy. I mean, most of the nuts, the almonds, peanut butter, avocados. You know, I just read a statistic that people spend about $900,000 a month on avocado toast at restaurants. I say make your own at home.
Whoa, that's a lot of money we'd like to have back.
Olives, I mean, how gorgeous are these? These would be gorgeous on the, you know, little appetizer before Thanksgiving.
So all of these are healthy fats. So if we see this, you know, at a party, whatever, these are not bad. Now with nuts, we don't want to eat like a huge bunch, right? How much are we talking about for a serving? 1 ounce of almonds specifically is literally 23 almonds. I kind of say like a closed palmful, not a big palmful. To go to a party and count them.
And in fact, and there was just a study that came out last week from the American College of Cardiology and found that people that eat an ounce of nuts a day have lower risk of heart disease than people that rarely eat nuts or never eat nuts.
Isn't that something?
So there's a lot of support. And this side of the table is kind of the polyunsaturated fats. And what's interesting is a lot of people know that omega-3 fats are good for you, but they don't know, they can't necessarily tell you what foods they're in. Maybe they know fish, but they also think that polyunsaturated fats are bad for you, but omega-3s are one type of polyunsaturated fat.
Okay, this is so confusing.
I know, I totally get why people are confused.
So if you look at a label, how do you know what's what here? What am I looking for?
Yeah, well, you don't really. I mean, this has Alaskan sockeye salmon and salt. It's pretty simple. But generally speaking, seafood, especially the fatty fish, which makes sense. You want more of the good omega-3 fats. They're in fish. You go for the fatty fish. So the salmon.
We have a stuffed salmon here. I like this.
I brought this guy. He's less smelly than a fresh one.
That's really cool. But salmon obviously is good for you.
Canned salmon, you know, is a fabulous option. You can get pouch salmon.
Yep. Just throw it on a salad or whatever you want to do with it.
Yeah, whatever you do with tuna.
You've got sardines.
I do.
I just didn't realize they also have the omega-3s.
They are. I mean, salmon is pretty much king, and literally king salmon is king for omega-3s, but all salmon's good, but sardines, you know, and these lovelies I brought back from my last trip to France.
Those are great, you know, the lemon flavor and whatnot.
I think this might have come from Costco. I can't remember.
Yes, they do.
That brand,
you can get 6 or 8 of those for, you know, $8 or $9, so.
And walnut oil is so good on a salad, especially this time of year. Your greens of choice, a vinaigrette with walnut oil.
Ooh.
Sprinkle some walnuts on it, pears, maybe a little sprinkling of blue cheese.
Now, are all nuts sort of equal, you know, like is a macadamia and an almond different in terms of whether I want to make a choice for one or the other?
That's a good question. I mean, my go-to nuts tend to be walnuts and almonds, and partly it's because they're two of the best studied nuts. They really know that they have so many benefits for heart health, possibly even brain health. And I think, not for nothing does, a walnut half, I don't even know if I can find an intact one here, but it kind of looks like the brain.
Like a brain?
The hemispheres of the brain. I think that's kind of for
that's only
a
scientist thinks something like that.
But, and also walnuts, along with flax seeds and chia seeds, have a plant form of those wonderful omega-3 fatty acids. Our body doesn't use them exactly the same way, but they do have definite benefits for health.
So what is the best way, if we're trying to figure out what's good and what's bad, and some of it's just not intuitive, how do we learn which foods to eat? Like, I wouldn't know necessarily that chia seeds were good for me.
Yeah, well, and it's hard because a lot of foods kind of have a health halo and you kind of don't know if it's hype. I mean, basically any nut and seed is going to have health benefits.
Okay.
Each one might have a slightly different nutrient profile because you want to think about not just the fat, but what else is in the food. Olive oil, I think I mentioned, is hands down my top choice for cooking.
So that's a basic.
Yeah, and quality olive oil, as long as it hasn't been sitting around, it hasn't started to go rancid, it can be used at higher heats for cooking than a lot of people think. It's kind of a myth that you shouldn't cook with olive oil. I do all the time. I bake with it. My holiday pumpkin bread does not taste like olives because I use olive oil in it.
So you use that instead of the canola oil and you're fine.
I
Interesting.
do. And I was real hesitant the first time I did it, but it's like, oh, it turned out fine. In the Mediterranean, they use it for baking.
Good to know. And since we have you here, just let's talk about sweeteners for a second because Donald started it and we've been talking all day about getting sugar out of your diet. So when you're baking, maybe if it's pie day for you, it's pie day for me, can we use substitute sweeteners and are there ones that you recommend over others?
Yeah, I don't use a lot of substitute sweeteners. I think, if you were trying to use something like Splenda, you have to kind of have a specific recipe because you don't,
it's
do
not
one for one. Yeah. My philosophy is for things like desserts where, of course, you're going to have sweetener, use the real thing, but then maybe look at where added sugars might be creeping in the rest of your diet. Things like soups, condiments, it's all over.
It's amazing with soups, isn't it? Like a tomato soup, just how many carbs and sugars are in there. It's phenomenal that you just wouldn't know. You wouldn't guess. Thank you very much. Glad you brought the fish. Up next, how you can win a vacation to Disneyland for 4 this holiday season. We'll be right back.